McGrane, when there have been issues in Ada County elections, how have you handled them? And what lessons have you learned from running elections in the state's largest county that you'd like to bring to elections statewide?
Thank you for the question, Betsy. I think it's one of the things that highlights just my experience. Having been involved in every aspect of our elections, I think that's one of the important things that I bring to the Secretary of State's office. I'm not just looking at it from a broad level, but I've actually been on the ground, working in polling places, dealing with the challenges of poll workers, printing ballots, and all of the logistics that go into our elections. Many people don't realize just how big of a scale they are. Often, elections are the largest event planning operation in any community in our state. And I've been through the experiences, both when it's gone really well and the challenges that come along with our elections. And so I've learned from that. And I think one of the things we need in terms of a Secretary of State is that experience, so that when a county clerk or anyone else calls, that they have the answers to the questions, both in terms of how our laws work, but also how things work practically on the ground. I think most Idahoans can relate to that in their jobs, needing someone that you can turn to who has the experience, knows the nuances of what you're doing on the ground, and how that will impact things. I face challenges, whether that's been printing ballots or other things, and have been quick to jump on and react to those challenges when they've come up. You know, elections are so involved, they're not necessarily easy. But that's where it takes a team of people, whether that's the 1,300 poll workers we use or all of the other elected officials and partners that we have along the way. It's why I'm proud to have county support throughout the state, whether it's county commissioners, clerks, sheriffs, or others, because we work hard to make sure our elections work well.
Can you give us an example of one of those times when things haven't gone really well and what you did to deal with it?
Absolutely. I'll give a great example just from the November election that just came up. All right, we had an issue where many people may not realize we rotate the names of candidates on the ballot, right? Making sure that each candidate gets a turn at the top. We found out that there was an error related to one of the races printing those ballots. We were quick to jump on that and to print new ballots to make sure that voters in early voting and on election day would have the right resources. When we learned that the election was close, I shared that information with all involved, including the candidates. We conducted a recount where everything matched and worked with everybody involved. And I think it's one of the best examples of elections integrity, is making sure everyone has the resources. One of the things I learned through that process was that we needed a tool to address it in case we ever need to take an election to a judge. And I'm proud to say I got legislation through this past session to make that possible, that we can have judicial review in a close election and giving the authority to a judge to call a new election if it's necessary. I think that's a good example of just having that on-the-ground experience and knowing when something nuanced like that happens, what to do and how to react.
Melissa, could I make a comment?
And actually, Senator Souza, you are next, and if I may pose the question to you.
But Betsy, I wanted to respond to what Clerk McGrane just said.
Okay, sure.
If I could.
Please.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about the Meridian City Council race that you were referring to in the November election, and that I had a conversation with the gentleman that was not rotated as his name was on the ballot. And he told me that it was not until after the election and after your office realized that it was going to be a close election, that you let the people involved know that there could be a problem, that there was something that wasn't done correctly. I've been a business owner for 37 years with my husband, and I was general manager for 15 of those years. I know that mistakes happen, but it's how you handle the mistake that makes the difference. Transparency is really important in our elections, and I would have preferred to see you or your office give that information to the people involved on that ballot right as soon as you discovered it, so they would have anticipated that this could be something that they should watch.
I'll give you 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you, Melissa. I think that highlights just the lack of experience when it comes to how complex our elections are and everything that's involved. I think one of the biggest challenges, there are so many moving parts, and this is an example. The rotation on the ballots, it's just a matter of having equal opportunity for the candidates. And on a top ticket race like the Meridian City Council race, it has a very minimal impact. It's the down ballot races where it has a huge effect. In every instance we track and monitor and make sure that we keep track of everything so that we can share it with the candidates and give them the tools. I worked very closely with the candidate in this race to make sure he had all the information tools and even guided him through the recount process to make sure he could see all aspects of our elections. I think the biggest challenge is I would have liked to put this before a judge, and it's why I worked on legislation, because we didn't have it in our elections to try and address this issue, and now we do. I think it's that kind of leadership that we need in the Secretary of State's office.
Senator Souza.
Excuse me, Betsy. Alyssa, I've got to address this too, because this isn't quite the end of the story.
I'll give you 60 seconds and then we need to.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. So Michael Hahn, I interviewed him almost immediately, and I think Clerk McGrane is that the fact of the matter is you were aware that the ballots went out not randomized, and it was 2,100. So I guess it was statistically how these 56 votes that he lost by, statistically, was that enough or not near a margin of error to where he could have actually prevailed. So I think the problem is that it should have been caught immediately, it should have been stopped immediately, instead of letting it go, and then you had to seek counsel from the Secretary of State and the Attorney General's office. And as much experience as you've had, I would have thought that maybe this is something you would have either just retrieved those 2,100 ballots and done the election over, but the fact that you didn't have a remedy right away was very concerning to the candidate and also to me.
I'll give you 30 seconds and then we really do need to move on.
Okay.
Melissa, once again, this just shows a lack of understanding of how our election laws work in Idaho. I sought the counsel and assistance of the Attorney General and the Secretary of State because that's what Idaho law requires. I did not have the legal authority to address it, so I went to those who do have the legal authority and actually guided Secretary Denny in a way that we could have put it before a judge. It's that level of experiencing and knowing Title 34 in our elections code that really is the necessary skills to be Secretary of State.